My name's Scott Carpenter. I'm with the Adobe Whitewater Club. Currently the president of the Adobe Whitewater Club. Thank you for joining our monthly virtual meeting. We started doing these after COVID came about because we were all missing talking about the river. So hopefully everybody can sit back and enjoy the show, and you got your favorite beverage there. Please keep yourself on mute. If you do have a comment, you can go to the chat session or chat window pane and type it in there. I'll let Kent talk about how he wants to answer questions. He may want to do them all at the end. We'll kind of monitor chat though and try to answer some of them for you while we're going. But keep yourself on mute so we don't get the barking dogs or hollering kids or loud musics. But thanks for joining us tonight. I'll go over a couple of quick announcements. The Adobe Whitewater Club stream access. There's several entities that are involved with that. New Mexico Wildlife Federation, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. I'm missing others too, but we're still waiting on our writ of mandamus for a response from the Supreme Court, which we filed back in March of 2020. It's been over a year. And I've heard in these cases that's not unusual, and it could drag on for another year. Some latest recent developments, there's 5 applications, 5 more pending for non-navigable waters in front of the New Mexico Game Commission. They had approved 5 or 6 back in 2019. This would be an additional 5 if they approve them. They were set to vote on those in June 18th. The Game Commission chairwoman had to push the voting out until August when she recused herself from voting pending an investigation of conflict of interest. Her daughter accepted a job with the lawyers that are representing these privatizers. So it's clearly a conflict of interest. There was also a game commissioner, David Sewells from down south. He passed away unexpectedly. That created an opening on the board. Recently, there's another board member, and there's only 7 positions on the board. There's been another one that has resigned. So that leaves 2 open positions. These positions are supposed to be filled by the governor. They have certain requirements to represent a certain area of the state and be either conservation minded or landowner minded. They have several requirements that they're supposed to meet to keep a balanced representation on the commission. So we're still waiting on those appointees by the governor. We're still waiting on the game commissioner's votes. That's now set to be in August. That could all be precluded by a sudden announcement from the Supreme Court regarding the writ of mandamus and the validity of that law. So there's a lot of things about stream access that we're following. A few things are exciting. Most of it is just sit and wait and see. So that's the advocacy. A huge win today was the Sabinosa Wilderness has a big private property that's been added to it. I don't know if you're familiar with the Canadian River, but from Taylor Springs down to Mills Canyon starts into that Sabinosa Wilderness area. So it may affect the Canadian River, which has been flowing recently due to all the rains up there. If I didn't have a real job, I would have been out there for a few days on the Canadian. From Mills Canyon down to Sanchez has been running. A couple of other creeks up there. Of course, the Pecos has been flooding. So monsoon season hit hard. It's kind of tapered off now, but I'd love to hear some stories of people that are getting out on some of these seldom run rivers like Revelita Creek, the Canadian, Mora, Cimarron. There's a bunch of them. I want to point out there's a kind of a club trip this weekend on the Middle Box. There's 7 of us going out on the Middle Box. We're going to hike in on Saturday. It's posted on our website. We could take a couple more. We don't want to get too many, but we're going to spend the night. It's only a 9-mile run. We'll spend the night Saturday night, come out on Sunday, do some fishing. Water's low, probably going to rain on us. Typical river outing. Anyway, as far as other announcements, we've got quite a bit of gear donated to the club. We've got 7 boats in the AWC shed right now. We're still working on policies and checking on insurance and how we can rent those out or check them out to members only. Pool sessions are going like gangbusters every Thursday at Sunport Pool. Now there's talk of Tuesday nights being stand-up paddleboard sessions. That's still in the works. It might start the 27th of July. So keep tuned into our websites and other Facebook sites for that. Donna, can you think of anything else, or Steve? I'm probably missing other items, but we're going to have our board meeting next Monday. So until the board meeting comes out, we'll have some more definite things there. Oh, clinics. Yeah, we've got some clinics scheduled. So go to our website, adobewhitewater.org. Go to the about, surf around on the website, and there's some clinic sites, clinic dates available. Thank you, Donna. I'm actually helping with one on August 14th up on the race course. It's a level 3 clinic. I know that day there's 2 other clinics up in different sections of the river up there. So pick one that's suitable to your skill set and your craft. We've got, I think, a canoe session. There's a self-rescue session out at Cochiti Lake, not really affiliated with our clinics, but there's a lot of information on our website that people forget to see, or they're not on Facebook, so they rely on email. So we still have to push things out on email. This meeting announcement went out today on email just to make sure that everybody was reminded about it. But support the pool sessions, support the club, join the club. There's a lot of benefit to being a club member, the community aspects of it and socializing. Someday we'll get back to face-to-face meetings, maybe next month, if we can find a proper venue. I still hope to continue a virtual feed so that people don't have to travel from Santa Fe or Los Alamos or Texas just to participate in our meetings. So that's something we're going to strive to incorporate into future meetings. We're always looking for future meeting presenters. So if you've got a topic or a great trip report that you'd like to present, just get a hold of the Adobe Whitewater Club board and let us know, and we'd be happy to have you talk to the club meetings. At risk of forgetting anything else that I might share at the end, I'm going to go ahead and announce or introduce Kent Ford. Please watch the entirety of his meeting. Kent has created a river guide. He's probably had some help as well, but he's been working on a river guide. And one section that guide covers is the lower Animas River from Durango down to Aztec. He's going to tell us about how he did 180 miles from Durango all the way down to the Four Corners area and out on the San Juan, I believe. So I bet he's got some great stories. Some of our club members just recently did a San Juan trip. A few of us did this exact Animas down to, or Durango down to Aztec at the end of May. We had a 600 CFS rate back then in the end of May. Unfortunately, the water's dropped off now that only real small boats can make it down, I believe. Kent might correct me on that, but Kent is employed up at Four Corners River Sports. He's been there for a number of years. He can give you some more details about his background, and he's been a great figure in the boating community. And someday I hope this river guide that he's going to share with us tonight gets published in a spiral bound waterproof manual. The folks up at Four Corners River Sports are kind enough. They even printed out a copy for me when I passed through town the other day, but they helped me download it to my phone. So it is available. He's got some great graphics and write-ups in there. He updates it continuously. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Kent Ford. take it away.
Well, thanks, Scott. That's awesome. This is the Grand Canyon behind me. It's not the Animas. Um, but yeah, thanks to Adobe Whitewater, y'all are so important to the sport well, of course, for the stream access issue and for getting out on these seldom run rivers, which kind of curiously is the topic of my presentation here. And hello to old friends that I see have showed up for the talk. So yeah, it's super to be here. My presentation tonight is kind of curious in that it's can you all see a screen there? Anyway, give me a thumbs up.
Yep,
Yes.
I see it.
You got screen share? Okay, good. So my presentation is about the Animas in San Juan, but I'm going to start with a little bit of an introduction to myself. I live up in Durango. Yeah, this is the way Durango looks sometimes. It's kind of crazy. It's a crazy river town. This is the river parade. It's zany, but the number of boaters and boats in Durango is off the charts. Maybe the highest population of boats anywhere in the country. But strangely, no one goes below the city limits. Like, well, Scott did, but very, very few trips have gone any further. And so that sort of got me interested in promoting going around the next bend, going a little bit further. Need to mention, of course, the spill we had 3 or 4 years ago, the Gold King mine spill. Happily, I guess, well, unhappily, we got a lot of national news out of that. But the happy outcome of that is that we did get a Superfund site for 40 some odd mines up in Silverton, and the river already is cleaner than it was in the last 10, 15, 20 years probably. So I guess there's a bright side to that. A little on my background, I used to race slalom C1. I sort of switched over from racing into being a race announcer. I announced for the public address system at 5 different Olympics. This one in Beijing, which was kind of crazy. It's zany where our sport has gone in some ways. Some of those Olympics, I had opportunity to run the course wearing a wireless microphone to teach the spectators about what the river was like, and that was kind of fun and kind of mind-boggling to try to make happen. We're super psyched in Durango because the representative to the Olympics this summer in C1 is a Durango kid, Bug Locken. So when the Whitewater events of Tokyo show up on TV, watch for Bug if we get so lucky to have any coverage. I also have a video business, which I've pretty much shut down now and set all my videos free on the internet. So you can get any of these for free as streaming or downloads if you Google Kent Ford Video or my company name's Performance Video. And that's where you'll get links to downloads and streaming. But I mentioned I was going to mix in a little bit of history because I got pretty fascinated about 10 years ago, did a historical documentary on the history of whitewater sport. And I'm going to give you a tiny little teaser of that, just to enhance a bit of our presentation on the Animas River. But that video covers about 100 years of whitewater adventure, and it's super fun. It's amazing what crazy influences came together to build this sport of ours. You know, from the birch bark canoes of the First Nation people of Canada. This is from the Canadian Canoe Museum, which is just astounding, the sort of craft they had. Of course, the fur trappers were using the canoes to get to the rivers, and that there were no highways, so the canoe was the rivers were the highway. And then it sort of morphed into recreation, and I bet some of us can appreciate the boat tie downs here on this old vehicle. Look at that windlass on the hold the canoe down. Kind of crazy. This canoe also in the museum is pretty fancy. It has a record player for wining and dining the gals, and it also has a bar in the other end of the canoe, you know, so you can have your drinks at night as well. So kind of remarkable. And the canoeing early on, you know, the recreation morphed a little bit towards kayaks, kayak paddles. But even by 1950, and this is sort of getting into the preface for our presentation tonight on the Animas, that by 1950, it was still a cover of National Geographic magazine sort of event to run the Susquehanna River or the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. area from source to sea. And in a strange way, you know, that was a big deal in 1950, but a lot of our rivers see a lot of use in highly focused areas, and we're neglecting some fabulous sections of river, like the Animas below Durango that I mentioned. But these guys wrote up their big expedition in National Geographic magazine in 1950. Of course, along the way, there were some broken boats. Kind of not only kayaks had fully broken boats, there were a few years of nothing but fiberglass canoes. Those, of course, would be truncated expeditions. And then another example of people exploring kind of unusual river runs from New York, people could take the full boat train up the Hudson River, and then they would assemble their full boats in the train car. And then when the train would stop for them to get their boats out and carry their boats down to the river. Pretty remarkable that those sorts of exploration things happen way back in the day. And I am a big fan of us, you know, sort of rediscovering these sections of river that don't get much use. So that brings us to the Animas. The top of your picture here is Durango. The Animas flows down across the Colorado state line into New Mexico, into Aztec, down to Farmington, Kirtland, soon after Farmington. And then in Farmington, it meets the San Juan River. And the San Juan then flows on down around to Shiprock and to Bluff. And that's sort of the Google Earth view of it all. And I don't think my mouse quite works on that, but top of your screen is the mountains up around Silverton, and you can see the river heading south until Farmington and then heading west to Shiprock and ultimately Bluff. But why did people not go below the Durango city boundary? I really was starting to baffle me about 10 years ago. It turned out that, you know, I'd ask people and they'd all say, well, they're dams and they're fences. Well, so that's what sort of instigated this idea of doing a guidebook. And since then, between the efforts of the guidebook and River Reach Foundation in Farmington, we've really opened up huge amounts of the river. And we have it mapped here. This is a little example of the map starting in the south end of Durango. And you know, we've got sort of a mile by mile description of the hazards and any historical things like the water tank for the old train service. Then down to New Mexico, the camping sections are outlined, and I'll tell you a little bit more about all that in just a moment. So here's a sort of a view of, I'm just going to run through some quick pictures to give you a feel for what the river is like below Durango. It's probably at about 2,000, 2 or 3,000 CFS. You know, a lot of choppy class 2 whitewater. There are some strainers that, you know, one has to have skills to turn their boat sideways and really paddle towards the inside of the bend to avoid them. There are a handful of diversion dams that are generally runnable and generally pretty friendly, but they're called out in the guidebook as well. You can see on the far shore a water tank for the old train line that used to run from Durango to Farmington. Really some nice subtle pretty bluffs along the river. A couple more of the diversion dams. And unfortunately, these diversion dams, they're sort of our project as caretakers of these rivers for our project for the next 10 or 20 years is to get these irrigation districts to have a brain and not just dump concrete and rebar in the rivers for their dams. I mean, there are ways they could make these irrigation diversions much friendlier for boaters, as are they're runnable, but they're not places that I would like to swim. This is one of the worst. It's you can see perhaps little spikes sticking up there. Those are old railroad, they're railroad rails that have been embedded in the bottom of the river and stick up every 6 feet or so. Just super nasty. Happily, it's in the guidebook. It's really easy to identify. And if you run the side of the rapid from where this picture is taken on the river left side, it's a very, very easy route to run through these, to negotiate these, or to line your boat through them if the water level was lower. This is one of the wilder, bigger drops on the river. This is a Farmington water intake, but all the water levels I've seen it's been runnable. People, locals intertube it at super low levels. It's kind of big. I mean, it's like a 4 or 5 foot drop, and it's not an easy place to scout, but it's at all the water levels I've seen it, there's a pretty clear V and a pretty clear route right down the middle. So we're lucky there, and I've not seen any water levels with a bad hydraulic to it. And I've run it up to 4,000 or 5,000 CFS.
Kent, I want to point out there was a cottonwood log hung up on the lip of that dam on the left of center back in May.
Oh yeah.
So wood is always a possibility on some of these diversions, getting hung up and changing things overnight.
Yep, that's probably the biggest hazards on these sections of rivers. Watching out for wood. It's kind of like it's class 2 whitewater, but you probably want to have class 3 boating skills, or at least, you know, some class 3 leadership in your group to help a group get through this stuff safely and happily. There we go. This is a Farmington Whitewater Park. A lot of people don't realize Farmington has a whitewater park, but it's got some nice features and nice little play waves, and at various at the higher water levels, it's pretty rambunctious. Like I'd say above 2,000 CFS, but around 1,000 CFS, it starts to get into sort of inner tubing water level and stand-up paddle boarders, that sort of thing. I wanted to mention that a lot of the work on the Animas in New Mexico has been done by the River Reach Foundation. And this is their map, which is at all of their access points. And all their access points are in purple there. And they have a really robust system of really good access points for paddlers. There's a river hiking and biking trail evolving along the whole side of the river all the way down to the confluence and beyond. And it's really remarkable what they have there. And from Aztec to Farmington and beyond, you barely know that you're in and around a big city like Farmington. It's the city is well shielded from the river, and there's a lot of invasive Russian olives, but you're pretty much on your own out there with very little commercial infringement on the river. It's quite a remarkable float, and I highly recommend it. One curious thing about these all these maps that River Reach did, all the mileages are off by 25 or 30%. So if you're going to Farmington or Aztec to do some floats, plan on it being a higher mileages than their maps indicate by 25% or so. This is Rick Page and his family. Rick is kind of the mastermind of putting together the Farmington trails, and it's fully amazing what they've done. It's really cool. Including, I mentioned this dam, which had back in the 80s, early 90s, killed some people because of a really dangerous hydraulic. And this is the way it used to be, really ugly, super dangerous hydraulic. Everyone should know dams are to be avoided. You know, when they're a low head dam like this, they're extraordinarily dangerous. Well, Rick and the city of Farmington went in there 3 years ago and have totally rebuilt that feature. They've totally rebuilt that dam purely to make it safe for navigation. And now indeed you can run down through the drop, and it's I would say it's not a play feature really, but it's certainly very runnable, big thrill sort of 4 or 5 foot drop now that's safe. So hats off to Farmington and River Reach for tackling that. And Farmington, as you might expect, is starting to look at ways they can diversify their jobs base with oil and gas leaving the area. And another project they're tackling, the San Juan County, New Mexico is tackling, is a new access point at Cedar Hill. And so again, you don't need to know the details of that other than it's supposed to happen this fall, and it's in that little guidebook that Scott and I'll make sure you know how to get. Oh, and by the way, that little guidebook has a link on Ural's website. I noticed that's the 2017 version. Yeah, and there's that. The best way to get the most updated version, yeah, Scott was holding up a printed version of the Animas. The best way to get this information is to go to riversports.com, Four Corners River Sports website, and sort of navigate to their Animas information. It's a little bit, you have to kind of hunt and peck a bit to find it, but it's designed so it could be printable by anyone. But you all have the 2017 version on the Adobe website, and there's a lot that's changed since then. So probably time to take that one down. Okay, I wanted to talk about camping because that's one of the really unique things we've got figured out as part of this guidebook sort of project. We discovered that there's a BLM parcel that's pretty darn nice camping. And I think Scott and his crew might have camped there. Is that right, Scott?
Yeah, we had about 5 or 6 of us there. There's an interesting little ditch just upstream or up the hill from the camp. The camp's getting very overgrown with willows and some Russian olive, but there are some BLM markers on River Left. It's about 8 minutes down from the big white house on River Right. So it's right above the state line. I forget the name of the canyon. Is it Long Canyon right there?
It's called Line Canyon.
Line Canyon?
was Line Canyon, presumably for the state line, but we've seen some mountain lion tracks in there as well. So I'm not sure which. But anyway, the camping there, I think I do have a picture. Yeah, it's something like that. I mean, it's not a groomed campsite, but we're hoping to get some work crews out there to do a little bit of super simple grooming and move some logs around. And it's a nice place to stop. There's also another kind of intriguing spot to camp. Well, I should point out this campsite, Line Canyon, is 20 miles below Durango. So that's a pretty big, long day, but it is doable at those water levels around 2000 CFS.
And just below that too is the Tico Time before you move on down to Aztec, if you mentioned the Tico Time Resort.
Yeah, and that Tico Time Resort is, that's a great thing because they are proving that there's commerce to be had by celebrating the Animas River up there. And they do allow you to take out, or they help you line up with the next RV park downstream to get a takeout there. So a plausible trip is a 1-day long float of 20 miles down to this campsite, and then 1 mile down to Tico Time. Then there's another campground that's actually really quite nice on the river in Aztec, New Mexico. And it's about a 5-minute walk from Aztec ruins. And if you've not been to Aztec ruins, well, what a perfect excuse to go. Do your float down to Aztec and then cruise over to Aztec ruins and then go out to dinner in Aztec. That's kind of an unusual river trip opportunity, but it's there, so take it.
Hey, Kent,
Yeah.
there's a question on the chat. Are there paved paths between the access points that could be used for bike or rollerblade shuttles before taco time? I don't know if that's part of the question.
Yeah, not, well, there are two answers to that. Down in Farmington, yes, there are sections of river you can do with really good bike trail access between the access points. And so in Farmington, the answer is an absolute yes. It's a little bit grayer. Well, there's no established bike trails up by the state line and Tico Time. So that's not a real good option. There are, like, if you're accustomed to doing big mileage biking, there are ways you can go to the oil and gas roads that are not the main highway to get from Tico Time up to Durango. And actually, this map shows a pretty good bike. That smaller, lighter gray route is pretty good biking, but you would have to do a couple miles on Highway 550. Yeah, good question.
I think the best bike trails are from Browning Parkway in Farmington down to Miller Bridge. That's about the only established trails. River Reach is working to expand those trails, but there's even some breaks in that.
So that's sort of that's the Animas from, that's a little snapshot of the Animas from Durango to Aztec and Farmington. But a handful of us got really curious recently about what's it like around that next bend? What's it like below Farmington? And so we loaded up some self-support kayaks and decided we'd tackle a little bit bigger adventure, putting in the north end of Durango and paddling 180 miles down to Bluff, Utah. So that's it's 60 miles down to Farmington. And so it's another 120 from Farmington to Bluff. This is kind of what the Whitewater looks like right out of Durango. But recent book by David Roberts brings up this kind of interesting quirk of history. I told you I was a little bit of a history geek. There's this story in there about from 1890, there were plans underway for a 400th anniversary of Columbus's discovery of America. And that fueled a whole bunch of entrepreneurs looking to do some archaeology for the Smithsonian Institution. And so this guy Moorhead and his cronies won the support of the Smithsonian and the museum at Harvard, American Museum of Natural History in New York. And their goal was to explore the rivers of the Southwest. And they had the members of this expedition have been selected with great care. They are young men, enthusiastic and skilled in their several professions, of excellent repute, sound in mind and body, and accustomed to field work. So they rendezvoused in Durango in 1892, 11 men, wagons, and then for reasons we're not really sure, they start to, instead of exploring by wagon, they decide to head down the Animas River. And 5 miles into their float trip, the crew hit rapids that tossed their clumsy scow from bow to stern. And good heavens, boys, look ahead. And they're dropped their oars and pretty much swam to shore. Their expedition a failure. And so that was our preface for heading off down the Animas from Durango. But by today's standards, it's really very easily navigable whitewater and spectacular. Now these photos start to dwell on the section below Farmington. We were camping on islands. Ultimately, we'd like to secure permission and some true campsites along the river, which we've not yet secured. So it's going to be a while till we have a guidebook for the section of the river below Farmington. But you can see the river starting to turn into the terrain starting to turn to desert. It is a Russian olive corridor. This particular section from between Farmington and Shiprock gets very braided and tiny little channels to negotiate. It would be tricky and dicey, I think, in a raft for fear that the channel you took would run out and get blocked by a downfall tree or Russian olive and leave you looking like this. This is down by Shiprock where we stopped for to resupply on water at the local gas station. Some beautiful camp spots, beautiful sunsets. But there are some dams down in this section. But this gets pretty intriguing because the 2 dams down here are associated with the 2 power plants down here that are gradually getting mothballed and taken out. So we have some optimism that we could get some mitigation to these dams and get them replaced by runnable features in the future. Because this one is pretty stinking ugly, as you can see. Happily, at our water levels, which was about 2,000 CFS, it was a pretty easy portage, but not at all pleasant whitewater, unrunnable, super dangerous, of course, no signage. Ugh, yuck. But once you're back in the river, it looks like this and pretty navigable below there. There's one other, Arizona Public Service has a water intake that fills Morgan Reservoir, I believe. And this one is pretty easily identifiable from up above. And this one is, at some water levels has a pretty nasty hydraulic, but at these 2000 CFS water levels, we were able to sort of cheat run it way over on one side, but it's there's enough risk there that I would hope that in the next 10 years we can get that get boat chutes on both of those dams. There's Shiprock. It's pretty prominent for a part of the river run. That's the backside of Sleeping Ute from Cortez. Off on the right side of your picture is the toe of the Sleeping Ute. It's not quite as dramatic from this side as from the other side. Lots of ruins along this section of river. You can tell the river's sort of taking on the feel that it has down in Bluff, complete with Moki steps carved into the sandstone. So one of these days, well, this section you could actually run currently by putting in near Montezuma Creek and add about a 10-mile section to the normal Bluff to Mexican Hat section that lots of people run. No rapids on this section. And as you can see, pretty spectacular water. And so mission accomplished. We made it to Bluff. And so this is back to the Bear's Ears book. So the river journey proceeded. At one point, a rancher, hearing the men shouting to each other over the roar of the rapids, came down to the bank. This is 1892, remember. Strongly urged us to abandon our project. Still, the men careened on towards Farmington and the San Juan. On the way, Moorhead admitted, we totally lost control of the boat and bumped into headlands, rocks, and trees. Half a mile north of Farmington, they hit a patch of slow water and the rafters called it quits. Here we made landing, set up for camp, tired, bruised, and bleeding with aching arms. Well, happily, that wasn't our experience, and I don't think it'll be yours either. It's a delightful run from Durango down to Farmington. Be happy to tackle any questions if anyone's got any curiosities.
Kent, I have a question. A couple of years ago, Marcel Gatzenbeib with San Juan Citizens Alliance did a great Animas Fest. The first event, and because of COVID, it couldn't be continued the next year, but he had camping at the Aztec RV Park. They launched at private land up at Cedar Hill, downstream of the 550 bridge, camped out. The next day they ran down to Penny Lane. It was a great event and very well organized, and we had 6 or 8 people from Farmington go up and had a great time from Albuquerque. Are they planning to do that again, or do you know?
I don't know. Of course, COVID threw everything up in the air, and we've had just they've had hiccups that they were trying to battle over the last couple years. So I don't know if they're going to get that back. I know they did start to focus their efforts a little more on the Farmington River Festival, which is Memorial Day weekend. And by focusing on that festival, they were able to focus more energy on Farmington and San Juan County administratively to get them to play along with things like building, by taking out dams and building access points. So I think that's been a bit of their strategy lately, but I'll pass that on to Marcel, or by all means you could as well, to see if he'll reinstitute that. And I'm sure if you all had a group that wanted to tackle it, or if you wanted to make it a club trip, we could help with some support between Marcel and myself.
How about flows? Right now, the flow is pretty low. How much flow is required to still be fun in a kayak versus an IK versus a 14-foot raft. We ran it, we had 3 IKs and a hard shell, and I was a 14-foot raft. And we had no problem, but we had 1,700 CFS and then 1,600 the next day. So we had plenty of water.
Right. Okay. I'll, let's see. I'm not on screen share anymore, am I?
I just see your face.
Nope.
Okay, good, good. In the guidebook, I do have a little part that has some float times with different craft at different water level. And I was going to look up. So I've floated from Durango to Bondad at 500 CFS. Oh, and okay, so here you go. This answers your question. 380 CFS, which is what it is right now. A group of friends of mine took 7 hours with novices, stand-up paddleboards, duckies, and kayaks to go from Dallabetta to Tico Time. So that's the 20 hour, that was 7 hours to go 20 miles. So it's doable in a big, long, gung-ho sort of day right now.
Okay.
And of course, any more would be easy. I think up about 1,000 CFS, it drops those times in half. So instead of 7 or 8 hours, it's 4 hours or so.
All right. Is there a good place to leave a car in Farmington and in Durango to do that run?
Oh yeah, I think you would not experience difficulties. Durango, Durango, I would probably park it up high away from the river, not right down next to the river. But people have not been experiencing problems up here. And in Farmington, there's so little river use that I think potential thieves just aren't in the mode of looking for boater cars to target. So I think you'd not have any trouble.
I had a question. Where did you say to put in above for that run that ended in Bluff?
Up in the little town of Montezuma Creek. Or is it Aneth? It's the next road bridge upstream from Bluff. And I can look at that as well. That I do have some rough mileages for that sort of thing in my latest guidebook. So
we met a couple of locals we put in at Sand Island on June 14th, I believe it was. And we met a couple of locals that had put in and done that section from Bluff, and they said they do it all the time, at least once a week. There's a great museum in Bluff. If you happen to be in Bluff with a couple hours to kill, they dress in period garb and they sell soft serve ice cream, and it's all free. And well, the ice cream you pay for, but stop at that museum in Bluff. It's well worth it. And they talk about the hole in the wall and San Juan Hill and all kinds of exhibits that they have, replicas of cabins and some of the original cabins as well.
And I have to modify the mileages I said off the top of my head. It's 15 miles from Bluff, from Montezuma Creek to Bluff, and it's 25 miles from Aneth to Bluff. So, yeah, a little bit longer distance, but yeah, it's a nice section of river, and no permit. So,
So I think I put the most recent update to your river guide in the chat.
oh, great.
So
Is the date
3/1/2021.
that's close. I have what June one. I can email you. Or,
Okay, this is what I grabbed on the Four Corners website.
yeah, I need to update that one. I try to update the one on Four Corners twice a year. It'll certainly be updated by next spring.
Kent, I have to ask on those stretches, remote stretches of the San Juan, do you ever encounter wire fences, cattle fences?
No fences. You know, I think the San Juan has high enough flows that it's just not an issue. But as you all are experiencing and fighting the good fight, you know, it's real important that we establish good user groups for all these sections of river. And you know, the best advocates are the people who get out there and use these rivers. So we can do that. But no fences from all the way from Durango to Bluff. And all the two dams that are unrunnable are below Farmington.
Right.
Well, hey, I wanted to thank everyone so much. It's you all, Adobe Whitewater and paddling clubs are so important for the sport. It's just, we're really lucky to have you as advocates for the river and for community mixing bowls for the boating community. And thanks to you all for having a good, vibrant club.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Awesome presentation. Wonderful things you're doing. Wonderful things you've done.
Yes,
Very-
thank you.
All right, well, we thank Kent. You all are welcome to hang out. We can keep the chat open for a while if you want to tell stories. I know a few of us ran that section recently. If Steve or Tony, if anybody's got a story that they want to share about that river or anything else related to the Animas. If not, then we could open it up to other activities or other trip plans that are coming up. We welcome people to stay, but if you've got something else you need to be doing, you're welcome to go as well.
Well, the only thing I would say about that run was it was a new section of river for me, which isn't that infrequent, but yeah, it was cool. But when you're up in the Colorado part, I mean, there's more riffly water and stuff, but there's houses and it's better on one side once you get into the Southern Ute part, but it's still cool. Yeah, I want to do the part below Farmington now.
We kind of had a running joke, and it was obvious when we crossed the state line that, you know, it went from riverside mansions and manicured lawns to a double wide versus a single wide. You know, if they took the wheels off, it was the high dollar house of the block.
Yeah, it was the
Mexico.
yeah, and there was some cool, really old cars
In the river, on this side of the
Yeah.
river.
Yeah, that I'm
There's
like,
one
how do
but-
those things still have chrome? But
There's one between Aztec and Penny Lane that's on its top, right, hanging off the edge. About half of the car is hanging off the edge. One of these days it's going to teeter in, but it looks like an old Ford Galaxy.
They use that to buck up the river, right? To keep the river from degrading there. But there was a lot of garbage.
from making their trailer fall in the river, yeah,
Yeah,
or their
Yeah.
barns or whatever. More
It was a whole different mentality. People would put whatever they use. There's parts of the Chama that have big cottonwood stumps lining the river for erosion control. Up in the Four Corners, it was old cars and concrete. They call it urbanite. You really have to be careful with inflatables due to the metal in the river and concrete and natural obstructions. But the man-made obstructions are really what the fear is on those rivers up there, but it's still beautiful. And nobody asked about fishing. We did have a person that fished the entire way from Purple Cliffs down to State Line, and I don't think he ever got a bite. He ended up losing 3 lures. He was a bit frustrated. But the water was high, so I think fishing is better at lower levels that are not as conducive to paddling. So you got a trade-off there.
right below. I'm not a fisher person at all, but right below the campsite at where that canyon came in, Line Canyon or whatever it is, That place, I think if you hung out, would be a good
Mhm.
fishing spot. At lower water for sure.
Yeah, there was a ditch
Adam
overflow
thought the
there.
same.
We saw a beautiful cactus in bloom right around that ditch siphon. There's got to be some good hiking. There's a ton of arches up around Aztec and Heart Canyon,
Oh, yeah. there was.
both sides of the river.
We saw an eagle too, didn't we?
Yep.
An eagle. Yeah. And can't you camp at Tico time? Didn't
You
say
can,
the
yes.
the
I think the,
campsite?
I think the fee is $15. We might have put the link in the announcement for Tico Time so that you can check that out. It's a fairly new facility, but I think they charge $15 for a campsite, which allows you to park a vehicle there overnight in one of their tent sites. They have the prime tent sites are on the east side of the river. You drive across the river on a bridge to
bridge,
grassy
yeah.
areas. The more primitive gravel sites are on the west side, $15 a night. But that gives you full use of all their facilities: showers, water slide, zip line, stand-up paddle boards on the pond, whatever you want to do there. And their plan ultimately is to have like 200 or 300 RV sites along the river there. But if we can put up with the crowds as we pass through, it does provide a good logistics for put in and take out points. So be thankful that it's there.
And I think, if I can chime in for a second, I think it's really valuable to, because as that place matures, it's going to prove the economic value of the river to Farmington and San Juan County. And that's just, that's going to really, that's going to be really valuable for the future. And,
Yeah, you want to mention the Water Trails project? Marcel Biggs had been involved with that. I'm sure Rick Page is involved with the water trail efforts up in that area.
yeah, so Marcel Gutzenbide and Marcel Big and Rick Page and I have all had our fingers in a little bit of this project that is sort of handed off like a hot potato from one person to the next. I mean, Rick Page and crew, River Reach, they're doing the heavy lifting down in New Mexico. They have the amazing track record. But the paddle, as far as a paddle trail, at this point, really just developing this guidebook and the outreach projects that Marcel from San Juan Citizens Alliance are working on. That's the main focus. Yeah, I wanted to mention one other thing. Tom Roby asked how many days did it take us to do that 180 miles, and I should have pointed that out. It was 4 nights, 5 days, 4 nights and 4.5 days on the water to do that Durango all the way down to Bluff.
Do you remember what your flow was?
Yeah, it was
2,000, you said?
well, but it popped up to 3,300 the next day. So we had somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000.
I have one more question, kind of unrelated. Baker's Bridge up on the Animas north of Durango, private area. They closed it off recently due to vandalism and graffiti. Is there any chance that Durango or Colorado State Parks or somebody could make a purchase of that private land and open that up as a public venue eventually?
It's it's on our radar screen, I would say for sure. By hour, I would say it's starting to be on the community radar screen for something that we need to make happen.
Yeah, I saw a post today about the city possibly purchasing a park within the north end of Durango, garden park area, and it reminded me of that Baker's Bridge. That's a traditional historical landmark that kids have grown up. You know, it's a rite of passage if you're Durangoan to jump off the Baker's Bridge up there.
Yeah,
And,
of course
and
that It's gonna be tough to get an agency to buy it so Fort Lewis kids can jump off it.
Yeah,
But
if you've never been there, it's something worth seeing. And the fact that one of the properties, I think both sides actually have come up for sale is an opportunity. It's a high dollar venture, but it's something that Colorado Parks or Durango or the county or somebody should be looking into.
yeah, it's just starting to hit discussions.
Kent, along the same lines, you talked about those two very dangerous dams, I think downstream of Farmington. Is there anything that we as a club could do to help promote getting those reconstructed?
I think there will be. We just haven't gotten that organized yet. But I think we need to start advocating for that.
It hasn't been highlighted really because it's not popularly known. Not many people do it.
Yeah,
I've run as far as Westland Park, and I've heard that access is not on the river anymore, so it's not doable for rafts. You'd have to carry everything to Westland Park there at the bottom of Harper Hill. There's a bit of a diversion there as well. And then I've gone down to Kirtland and taken out there at a swift access point, but I've not gone down to the bridge that goes between Upper Fruitland and the Nappy out to the APS power plant. I've driven over that bridge, but it'd be cool if there was an access point along that bridge somewhere.
yep. Yeah, we got to get more people down there so we can bring up these issues and advocate that direction. Until a month ago, I'd never run below Farmington. So that was part of why I wanted to get down there, is to see what was involved. And actually, I'm having seen those two dams, I'm more optimistic now because they're not big. And I think there's, even if they're not fully removed, which they should be if the power plants go under, but if they're not fully removed, I think it's well within reason to ask to get them with a boat chute.
Maybe approach it from an environmental standpoint and call it a fish ladder, that we need to have fish passage installed,
Right.
which happens to allow a kayak to float through.
Exactly.
What about the dam right there by the hogback? There used to be one there. You could barely see it from the roadway 550 headed out to Shiprock.
Oh, I know what you mean. Yes, it's like a rubble dam diversion.
Okay, so that didn't pose any problems as far as portage?
Yeah, no.
Google Maps is a great tool. You can nowadays,
Yeah.
the maps are current enough that you can actually scout a river. You can find campsites and where to put your tent alongside a river from Google Maps in some of the more populated areas.
Yeah, that would have been a hard portage for a raft, but it was an easy portage / paddle for kayaks.
Okay.
Well, again, a super job you all do. Thanks for being a club and supporting paddle sports.
Well, thank you, Kent, for creating this guidebook. It's an excellent resource. And so, Art, do you hang out at Four Corners River Sports Store very often? If we stop in there?
I wanted to correct you. I'm actually no longer an owner there. I have lots of ties there, but I'm not an owner, nor do I work there anymore.
Okay.
But I guess my main thing in the community has been doing these instructional films. And everyone, I mention again, you're welcome to download or stream those. You go to performancevideo.com. They're free downloads or free streaming. Or if you still prefer DVDs, just send me a note. I'm happy to mail you a DVD.
Thank you. We'll include you in our resources pages for sure. One more thing to mention, another historical figure up there is Jack Klopper with Jack's Plastic Weld up in Aztec. He's a great guy. He's got great products, and he's been a real asset to the community and the river runners up in Aztec, Four Corners area.
Okay, well, hey, thanks all. I'll take off, but feel free to send me a note if anyone has any further questions.
Thank you so much, Kent. This was an excellent presentation.
Super. Happy.
That's super cool. Thanks a lot.
Happy to do it anytime.